Welcome to the 201st installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, sustainable agriculture, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. While growing up on his family's farm in southeastern Minnesota, Caleb Anderson associated cattle with destruction of the land. He had witnessed how the animals could overgraze hillsides, producing bare soil that was prone to erosion. But when he returned to the farm after graduating from college a few years ago, Caleb came to realize it wasn't the animals themselves that were the problem. It was the way they were managed. Simply turning them out into open fields and letting them graze at will was a disaster for the hilly, highly erosive land his family farms. In recent years, he has seen firsthand how farmers in Minnesota and other states are using livestock as a way to actually heal the land while also making money. These farmers are doing this by using carefully timed, managed rotational grazing on perennial pastures, as well as cover crops. Such systems are not only cutting erosion and runoff above ground, but are building soil health below. At a recent Land Stewardship Project Soil Builders Network Field Day, Anderson and his family showed how they have extended their grazing season and improved the soils on permanent pastures utilizing managed rotational grazing. They've also added economic value to marginal acres by grazing cattle on diverse, cocktail mixes of annual cover crops. By moving the animals frequently, Anderson leaves behind lots of uneaten biomass, which feeds the soil and builds organic matter. In addition, the farm's corn and soybean acres have been converted to a system that protects the soil using no-till production and cover cropping. In short, the Andersons are striving for a system where profitability and soil health go hand in hand. After the field day, Caleb talked to me about his changing view of livestock's relationship to the land, ways he's building soil health, and his goal of not just sustaining the land, but regenerating it.
So Caleb, you had talked a little bit about coming back to the farm, and you were trying to figure out a little bit of a way to integrate yourself into the farm, kind of, I guess, make room for yourself with some different enterprises. It sounds like maybe a little bit to your surprise, it turned out livestock, or specifically cattle, was the way to get back in, because you weren't really a big fan of being around cattle.
When I grew up, background that our land was just grazed continuously, and so I saw the symptoms of poor cattle management, and so I being young and recognizing that, I associated the washouts and the poor look of the land to the cattle, and so I grew up not liking cattle for that very reason. I told my dad several times when I get involved, the first thing I'm going to do is sell the cows and let all the pastures grow up and start a game farm. And the ironic part is that when I came back from college, I was looking for a way to get involved on the farm, and my dad wanted to hold the cash cropping close to chest, if you will. He that's not something that he wanted me to really take ownership of. He wasn't ready to release control of that, if you will. And so I saw, these continuously grazed pastures as a means of an area that I could get involved and cattle be that enterprise. And so we put in interior fences, essentially via cattle management, have improved our pastures now significantly. The amount of the forage that's there and the lack of weed pressure that used to exist, whether it was the bull thistle, the Canada thistle, the burdock, the wild parsnip, have all diminished significantly, and I'm seeing much more diversity in the pastures that never were there before, just all around benefit. And so the ironic part is that every day I move cattle, and I love doing it.
Well, and the other thing it sounds like you've noticed is, and this is something I've been hearing again and again this year at field days and when I talk to farmers, how much erosion we saw this spring with these heavy rains. And was on your farm today. I saw how hilly it is, and you said it had been kind of a rundown farm back in the day when your grandfather bought it back in the 40s. You said you didn't see that impact this year. That sounds like another positive aspect of this.
I think my dad was on the fence this year regarding the no-till, and I think these spring rains alone convinced him to park the tillage equipment, and we got to go no-till. Looking around at neighbors' fields, I went down in northern Iowa to pick up pigs this spring, and it was quite shocking, to see the amount of erosion, the topsoil that was in the ditches. And yes, we have, we farm on the hills, and no-till this spring and with covers, no-till and cover crops this spring. I didn't see any negative impact from the spring rains, and so we were quite pleased with that.
One thing that you kind of showed us was taking your pastures, your permanent pastures that have cool season grasses, they're dominated, but you're trying to extend that season a little bit by putting in some warm season annuals, and you've had mixed results, but in general it sounds like it's been a way to extend the season. And also you've been implementing some bale grazing to kind of help, I guess, maybe supercharge that biology a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, so this year and last year, what I did is I grazed cool season pastures pretty heavy. The goal is to knock down at least 50-60% of the forage that's there using tight groups, mob type grazing, and lay that mat down as a seed bed that I no-till drill at warm season annuals into. Last year, we had a little bit of a dry period in July. I got it planted. We didn't get any rain, and soil temperatures I could feel underneath this mat of grass was nice and cool. And the warm season annuals popped up, and man, I think they complemented the cool season pastures greatly. So the goal is to maximize the growth that can occur during our short growing season, and if you superimpose the cool season growth curve over the top of a warm season growth curve, you can kind of see what I'm trying to do in theory. This year I had a little mixed results. I think that was related to the cooler August that we had. I'm not willing to give up. It's something I'm going to keep trying. But I think it presents an opportunity to not only increase the amount of forage that's available for cattle to extend the grazing season, but also as a means of adding diversity, although it's short-term diversity, but adding diversity to that soil for the growing season.
So one of the things you had really kind of brought home, tried to bring home as a point with all of your examples of what you're doing on your farm, is really trying to tie in profitability with soil health. And I guess the key word here is profitability and not necessarily just maximum productivity, because sometimes that becomes the overarching goal, and we miss trying to create a system that's, I guess, self-reliant or self-generating. But you really see you can have that soil being self-reliant and regenerative, then it's really going to produce profits for you. Because that's an issue for a lot of farmers is, well, should I plant cover crops? I'm not sure if that's going to pencil out because of the cost of the seed, that kind of thing. But you really see that as integral, it sounds like.
I believe that there's a direct relationship between farm profitability, soil organic matter, and soil health. Using the 5 basic principles of soil health to improve our soils every year, I see that farm profitability can be complemented with the practices of soil health. And I see it as an investment. Every year, it's an investment in the soil, and that will pay me dividends. And so every year, things get better and better, and I'm not losing any of that soil, via the soil health practices with cover crops. In terms of profitability per acre versus production per acre, I think it's a conscious decision that this year we decided on our bean field not to have another herbicide pass. We looked at putting a little manual labor into pulling some weeds. It wasn't a lot of weeds in there, so we put in some manual labor, and so one kept our cost down on the herbicide, but 2, it was more of not wanting to add that extra herbicide. For me it was that if I can reduce my inputs, if I can lower that bottom line, I see that as a positive thing that ultimately will lead me to more farm profit.
People look at, say, the cost of that cover crop seed or the cost of certain practices and say, well, I can't afford that. But you're looking in the longer term of, like you said, it's an investment in the soil health. And it sounds like it ties in a little bit with, you were talking about, you don't really call what you're doing as sustainable farming, even though that's something that's been used for a long time. It's more regenerative. You talked about how you want to kind of sustainable, it can be, well, you're sustaining what's already there, the kind of the status quo.
Just to touch on your first point, Brian, this fall I'm choosing to invest in cover crop seed, which in turn will be my herbicide for my beans next year. So that cover crop will not only feed the soil, protect the soil, it'll also be my weed suppression next year. So direct relationship between the two. And two, I guess on the second point regarding the regenerative agriculture, I guess never heard, for the longest time, it's sustainable is kind of the buzzword. And I don't know if people have been on this, if this is the new buzzword, but it's something that I firmly believe in. My grandfather purchased our farm in 1945 as a fairly rundown farm, and we are dealing with a degraded resource. So I've got no interest in sustaining that degraded resource. My interest is in regenerating the resource each and every year to make it more profitable and to make it more healthy.
During our interview, Caleb Anderson mentioned that he adheres to the 5 principles of soil health. Here's a quick reminder of what those are. Number 1, armor the soil's surface with growing plants and plant residue. Number 2, minimize soil disturbance by reducing or eliminating tillage. Number 3, utilize a diversity of plants. Number 4, have a continuous presence of plants on top of the soil and roots beneath the soil 365 days a year. And finally, number 5, supercharge soil biology by integrating livestock into your farming system via managed rotational grazing. For more on the Land Stewardship Project's Soil Builders Network, see www.landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-722-6377. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.